some of the events that I've been to where I'm meeting with young dentists, they're thinking about buying a practice. Some of them want to buy a practice without patients, thinking, maybe it's a little bit cheaper. Some of them think, hey, maybe it's better to just do a startup. Now, what are the pros and cons between sort of each option? Because I think there's quite a few pros and cons between each of the three options. And a lot of dentists, they don't seem to know what they're getting themselves into, whichever option they sort of pick. So from your perspective, what are the pros and cons of buying a practice with patients, buying a practice without patients, or just doing a brand new startup?
Whenever I've had the opportunity to give some consultation to a young dentist in this regard, one of the first things I ask them is, what are your personal lifestyle expenses? Some have student loans, some have mortgages, they have families, they have obligations, they have family members living with them. Those dentists need cash flow, and they need immediate cash flow. So it's probably best to buy an established practice, even after paying the bank loan and the additional cost of purchasing established practice. You have an income. You're busy the first day you go in there, you have a full book, and you'll have cash flow, and you need that to support your lifestyle. There are other dentists in Canada that have no student loans. They might be single and live alone. They're not married. They don't have children. They're in a better position to buy that, say a brand new practice that was built by someone else with very few patients. They can do that because they have time on their side. They can afford to subsidize their lifestyle while they're waiting for the practice to grow. That's a very similar calculation to the brand new start from scratch practice, where you get the design, you get to pick the paint colors, the tile, the equipment, and that's fun. Building from new is fun, but it's a cash flow drain. I think it's very important for people to look at their personal financial needs more than anything. And if you have to pay more to buy a practice with 1,000 or 2,000 patients, yes, there'll be an additional cost to buy that patient list, the goodwill we call it, but you'll have cash flow and you'll be busy and you'll be able to perfect your competency and take on challenging cases. And in your first 6 months, you get to meet 1,000 or 1,500 people. They're all basically new patients to you. They're not new patients of the practice, but you might uncover treatment the previous owner didn't recommend, or the previous owner was not comfortable performing. Maybe you have a skill set the previous owner didn't, and you can probably grow the practice. Surveys show, by the way, that 1 year after buying an established practice with a patient list, most of the purchasers are generating more money because they're younger, they have debt, they have energy, they work through their lunch hours, they come in early, they stay late, they take emergencies on the weekends, and they generally grow the business because the previous owner was perhaps a little more set in their ways. They didn't want to do the evenings and weekends, and maybe they were starting to refer out complex cases that they perhaps performed when they were younger. Really, it's about cash flow, folks, and this is where you, as a dentist, thinking of these options, start from scratch or buy a turnkey practice with very few patients, or buy the larger, more expensive practice with, say, 1,000 to 2,000 patients, cash flow. Call your accountant, do a proper personal budget, and then we can combine that and dovetail it with the practice budget. And the large majority of people that I know that are in the marketplace, they want cash flow. They don't want to save money and wait 3 to 5 years to break even and run up your Visa card and run up your line of credit. And the last thing I'll say is that a lot of dentists will build a brand new dental practice, but they'll go associate someplace else to subsidize their income. Well, there's nothing worse than having a practice with a receptionist at the front desk and the lights are on and the doctor's not there. Here walks in a patient out of the blue. Maybe it's an emergency. I always use the analogy of a mother with 5 kids in the car. She drives in, walks in, and the doctor isn't here today.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, and he or she's associating elsewhere to make a living. And I get that. There goes a minivan of 5 people right back out the parking lot, and they're going down the road to the next practice. So that's a bit of an exaggeration, perhaps. But if you open a practice from scratch, you need to be there. And sometimes you're going to be sitting in your hands because you don't have enough patients in the beginning. And most dentists are not happy with that. And they're not making any money using their line of credit and their Visa card to subsidize their household expenses. I just think cash flow is king, and we all want to be busy, and we all want, to make a living right away. That's why people buy established practices.
Yeah, because I think the challenge is a lot of them look at, what am I paying per patient if I buy an existing practice? And in Ontario, you might be paying, $500 to $1,000 per chart. And it seems like a lot of money, especially considering you could probably get those patients through marketing for $100, $200. But the problem is that there's only going to be a handful of patients in your area every week, every month who need a dentist and are serious about going to one. So yes, you are going to acquire patients for a lot less money if you have a startup, but it's going to take you 3, 4, 5 years to, actually get up to that 1,500 to 2,000 patients. Whereas if you buy an existing practice, it's much easier, for us to like rev it up and double the revenue in maybe 2 years versus trying to start where nobody knows you, you have no reputation, nobody's seen you in that area before, and very few people are actually coming in.
Yeah, reaching the break-even point, and for most brand new startup practices, where they spend between $500 and $1 million to build it with equipment and leaseholds and all the other various costs, they're 3 to 5 years to break even. And in the first year, you will lose $100,000 to $200,000.
Yeah.
The second year, you're going to have a business loss of say $100,000, and that just starts to trickle up, and that has to be serviced. So you're increasing debt. So whatever you pay to buy the practice, you have to accumulate another 2 or 3 or 400,000 in short-term debt to subsidize, to pay the rent and pay the wages when there's not enough patients. So you have to add that in. That cost of startup is a lot more than the cost of building. It's killing it 3 to 5 years, and you could be at $1 million in 3 to 5 years when you finally reach your break even. Why not just spend $1 million or more and buy an established practice and take a $10,000 paycheck in your first month?
Yeah, I think a lot of them don't look at the lost opportunity cost, unfortunately.